I'm Lisa Guthrie, representing New Kent County, chairing the meeting here today. So if everybody will take a look at your agenda. And we'll go ahead with the roll call vote. Janice?
All right, 1 second. Town of Ashland, Mr. Martin,
Present.
Mr. Root.
Present.
Thank you. Chesterfield County, Mr. Richwine. Goochland County, Mr. Basham.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Goin. Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick.
Here.
Let's see. New Kent County, Chair Guthrie.
Present.
Mr. Moyer. Powhatan County, Mr. Powers. City of Richmond, Mr. Bunn. Vice Chair Erickson.
Here.
Ms. Almond. Mr. Smith. Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter. NAACP, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Willis. League of Women Voters, Ms. Weisiger.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenblum. RABA, Mr. Burnley.
Here.
Mr. Hamilton. Richmond Office of Equitable Transit and Mobility, Ms. Rowan. RVA Rapid Transit, Ms. Walker.
Here.
Mr. Hankins. Senior Connections, Mr. Williams.
Here.
VARP, Mr. Testerman. VCU, Mr. Leonard.
Here.
Ms. McClellan. VCN, Mr. Gordon.
Here.
Thank you, and Ms. Higgins. That concludes the roll call for attendance. We do have a
Mr.
quorum.
Testerman just came in.
Great, okay, I'll mark it as present.
Present.
Okay.
I took the bus.
Don't start with that.
You should have taken an earlier bus.
All right.
I don't get up that early.
We'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes in just a minute. So if everybody can turn their attention to the minutes. All right. Is there a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the minutes as printed.
For you, it's good enough for me. Exactly.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving along. We have some changes to the agenda today. We need to take some things out of order because we have Mr. Ewer from Henrico County here to present on the Green City program. So before we do that, we'll pause for a minute and open it up to any public comment we may have for today.
Not received any requests.
No requests for public comment, so we'll move ahead to the agenda, back to the agenda. Are there any other changes to the agenda other than taking them out of sequence to consider the Green City presentation? Any other changes or additions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead with Mr. Todd Ewer, and I'd be remiss before we start with this. We have Mr. James Holland here, Board of Supervisors from County of Chesterfield, and we may have another, do we have another?
Chair Lumpkins.
Chair Lumpkins from Goochland is here, so welcome to our TPO members.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay.
They took us seriously.
Yes, they did, we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Mr. Lumpkins, did you say something? I think we kind of spoke over you there. Okay, Mr. Ewer, it is all yours, so thank you for being here and sharing some information about this exciting new project.
Sure, let me make sure we have our technology working. So how do I go?
The arrows should be good. Is it not working?
Not working. Okay, got it. Thanks for having me. First off, I would like to apologize to the group for Henrico not currently having a CTAC representative. We're working on that.
Thank you.
so-
And when you go to recruit, tell them that there'll be vice chair as well, so.
Vice chair and lunch is provided. So
Right.
What more can you ask?
Instant leadership,
That's right,
yeah.
Yeah,
And an office with a view.
and an office with a view and,
Yeah.
and free parking. So thanks for having me. For those that don't know me, I am Todd Ewer with Henrico County Department of Public Works. My focus is really on the transportation side of the house, but work with all the other groups in the county, including planning. So I borrowed some of the materials for this presentation from them from the rezoning aspect of it. But so first I'll kind of cover an overview of Green City itself and then kind of move into the mobility and transportation piece. So location, a lot of people, even though the Best Products Building headquarters has been there since I guess the 50s, 60s, 70s timeframe, it's kind of hidden right at the one of the busiest interchanges in the region. So the site is located on the north side of Parham, east side of 95. Total of two kind of combined parcels of 204 acres. And they're calling it a planned eco district. A lot of people don't know what an eco district is, other than something to do with environmentally green thinking. So I'll cover that in a little bit. But the proposal for the development includes roughly $2.3 billion in private investment. 0 county tax dollars are going into the development itself. It was, I guess conversations first started back in 2020 timeframe, and it went through rezoning through the county process to be rezoned to UMU back in October of 2021. And you can see the kind of breakdown of the parcels. Roughly 94 acres is the former Best Products headquarters on the front end of the development, and 110 to 111 acres for what was formerly a Scott Farm in the kind of northern portion of the development. You kind of see the road cutting through the middle of it. That's mostly Scott Farm piece to the north. Surrounding it, you have single family to the south, on the south side of Parham. You have a older office park called Park Central immediately to the east, on the north side of Parham. Relatively new Dominion Energy Operations Center. It's 110,000 square feet, but very few employees, more automated, kind of in the roughly where you see the green in the Green City. And then oddly, the St. Gertrude School's athletic fields are in that vicinity as well. The county just bought that through the Sports and Entertainment Authority earlier this year, and we're leasing it back for them for the foreseeable future. And believe it or not, there's still an active farm with horses and cows, kind of butting up against 95 on the north side of the development. And so every time we have to go out there and do survey work or any activity, we have to coordinate with the owners to move the cows and horses from one pasture to the next. So there's places you get back there, you have no idea you're kind of bounded by 2 interstates. So that's kind of gives you lay of the land on where we are. As far as the rezoning that happened in 2021, and this is all kind of squishing. I think it's probably going to continue to move around a bit based on market, but roughly 2.56 million of commercial development in the form of Class 1 office, retail, restaurant, 2 hotels with a conference center are planned, and an arena, which I'll talk more about. The residential piece, I think that's probably relatively fluid. They were approved for 2,100 units with the mix shown on the slide. Some of the more recent stuff I've seen looks like they're trying to bump that up a little bit to maybe as much as 2,400 units. So pretty big development for parcel that size. Yet, despite all that, they're proffering to keep 76 acres of open space. Again, focus on green. They want to have interconnecting greenways, mostly off the roadway. They want to have pocket parks, community gardens, fitness parks. We're partnering with them on a stream that's back there to do a stream restoration project. So a lot of focus on, keeping things, keeping the built environment and I guess synergies with the natural environment, which again is kind of surrounding much of that development. The arena, that's probably the piece I'm most excited about. It's planned to hold up to 17,000 spectators with 2 public concourses, a private mezzanine that will serve as access to club seating and corporate suites. And they have the goal of being one of the greenest arenas in the world, because if you think about it, most arenas are not very green. So they're just signed an agreement with ASM Global earlier this year, I think in February, to help develop and operate the arena. ASM Global is one of the largest, companies that deals with these facilities in the world, including, I think they control and operate the facility in Arizona where we had Super Bowl this year. So they're a major player. And one of the things that attracted them to this location was where we are on the East Coast, part of the Boston to Miami I-95 corridor. So they have identified for a number of years a need for a facility in the Mid-Atlantic south of DC that can serve this size of crowd. So I think we anticipate there will be a lot of concert activity there. Maybe we won't get the Taylor Swifts of the world because we don't have a stadium, but I think it'll still attract some very big acts, and that's exciting. Obviously, the opportunity for sports and sports franchises of whatever size can be attracted. I think that's a great opportunity. So very exciting about that piece of it. Going back to the Best Products headquarters and the Best Products Plaza, this is a current view, kind of looking from the southwest up to the northeast. So that's kind of Virginia Center Commons and Hanover, the north frame of your picture. And the Walmart off of Parham is kind of right behind this picture. So that building, like I said, has been there for a number of decades. It was vacated and after Best Products went bankrupt in 1997 and sat vacant for a number of years. The county bought it, I'd say in about 2011 for just over $6 million. We kind of struggled to figure out what to do with it. We couldn't really find a tenant or somebody that wanted to buy it. It's a very odd shape. And even though it's a huge facility, over 300,000 square feet, it's just very eclectic. In fact, at one point, the county looked at using it for administrative office expansion, and we tour it, and it's like we couldn't wrap our head around how to use it for the county's purposes. So while they continue to seek, somebody that would want to move into it, we kind of, it was underutilized, generated no tax revenue. Our police were using it for SWAT training, for example. Just kind of a very underutilized facility. But what's interesting about it is it has a lot of, Art Deco type features, a lot of glass block, a lot of sculpture art. Apparently back in the day, it had a lot of artistic things all over the building. So this is kind of a shot of the interior and the exterior. That's the glass block you see on the right side. Again, very, very odd shapes and spaces. one of the neatest things about it, and it's still there, and Green City's gonna leave it there, repurpose it, is some sculpture, Art Deco sculpture that came out of the old airline terminal in New York City that closed in 1978. This was at 42nd Street, I believe. You can kind of see in the very top of the frame on the right, there were two of these kind of back to back, and it held a wood flagpole and I think some lighting. So those were rescued by the Best Products folks and brought down to this facility after that building was, or as that building was being torn down in New York. So those kind of sit outside the front entrance of this building, and they're gonna leave those there. Interesting enough.
Todd, will the building be retained, or is that gonna be?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is their reimagining of that building. You can kind of see that curved structure off to the left side of it. So, and part of their effort to lessen their carbon footprint and be, reuse, repurpose, recycle, they're gonna reuse the existing structure as much as possible and incorporate it into kind of a green building. Their goal is that this building will have a zero carbon footprint when they're done, between the solar panels, the green roof. Their focus is 3 levels. They're focusing on your main access between levels is via stairways as opposed to elevators, not only electricity, saving electricity, but also just from the standpoint of community and connecting people. So it's more easy to run into people and have conversations going up and down stairs than potentially on an elevator. So that's kind of their thinking on that. This would be focused as a kind of a Class A office space primarily with some common areas. So that's kind of their thinking on that, and that's one of their things they want to do first is first phase out of the ground is start to repurpose that building.
And are those solar panels all going all around?
Yes, solar panels all around on top. I can't tell from this picture, but I believe the solar panels would also provide shade parking for vehicles, much like you see in, I think this stadium out in Philadelphia has that in their parking lot. So going back to their kind of green focus, they're kind of have bogeyed a number of international type and national, I guess, recognitions, including LEED, which most people know about that, but the Living Building Challenge is something I didn't know about. The Living Building was created and challenge was created in 2006 by nonprofit International Living Future Institute. It is described by the Institute as a philosophy, advocacy, tool, and certification program that promotes the most advanced measurement of sustainability in all built environments. So their goal is to take the existing best products headquarters and look at it through that lens of the Living Building Challenge, which, if they're successful, would be the largest office building in the world that would have that designation, which would obviously help attract attention and as well as tenants. So that's pretty neat concept. Continuing on the sustainability piece, so through their design, they're going to focus on the work, play, live, and as well as having everything very walkable, having complete streets, and having that connectivity, like I said, between the natural environment and the built environment. In fact, with their focus on energy conservation and sustainability, to help kind of elevate their cause, the U.S. Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, visited the site in August of 21, I believe, to help publicize their approach to this. So they have a goal of developing a green energy district with a goal of 30% renewable electricity by 2030 and 100% by 2050, which is a pretty lofty goal. And they're gonna have an emphasis on alternate and efficient energy systems, an aspiration to be at net zero water throughout the development. Their stormwater, for example, infrastructure will be designed to be an amenity to the community. So there will be a lot of flow through planters, rain gardens, and green roofs. So on the mobility side, I mentioned the kind of the approach to 20-minute living concept with the work, play, live environment around the development, so that the goal is to basically meet the everyday needs of most people within either a 20-minute walk, bike ride, or use of local public transit. The graphic on the right, you'll see, actually came from the developer. This is not our graphic, and they've been very interested in partnering on public transit access as they go through the development. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So schedule. I guess I'll start out by saying they are behind schedule. They originally had hoped to be out the ground with the arena and the repurpose of the Best Products building last year. I think they held off a little bit because they were waiting to get the arena operator signed on, which, like I said, they've done as of this February. Our Board of Supervisors established the Community Development Authority, or CDA, this past January to basically support the developer in issuing bonds. They have not issued the bonds as of yet, so that's obviously a key next step for them to be able to start, moving dirt. And we don't control that schedule, so really we're at the mercy of the developer and the economy, to be honest. I mean, issuing bonds right now with interest rates is a bit of a challenge, so I think that's probably something they're monitoring very closely. So based on where we are right now, we are hoping that they'll get the first pieces under construction sometime next year. That's the last conversation with the developer. That's what they're telling us. We're scheduling all of our work to be completed, or at least mostly done, by the time anything comes online there, which again, the focus would be on getting the arena completed by 2026 and some office space up and operational in that same time frame. Full build out based on these projections puts us at about 2035 for the completion of all the residential components of it. I will also note that even though it was all rezoned by one developer, they did not fully control all of the property at the time of rezoning. So another LLC owned much of the northern piece, or the Scott Farm piece of it, which was the residential component. And at this point, the other developers is moving forward with getting approval for those developments in probably 2 to 3 phases. So that's actually further along than the commercial piece to the south. So moving into the mobility piece of it, again, strong focus on transit, access via transit. We're working with GRTC right now to get that, at least the transit spine service in place up the Route 1 corridor. Keeping in mind that Route 1 is just on the other side of I-95 from this development, roughly a half mile away. So probably further than most people are going to walk to get to the bus service. So we'll have to kind of figure out that connection piece as the development comes online. But the good news is we're shooting for next May to have transit service extended along the Route 1 ABC up through downtown. Right now that service ends. It's kind of cut off at the top of the page here. We're kind of right at the Azalea, Wilmer, I-95 corridor. So that extension of the Route 1 service up Route 1 to Parham will be in place by next May. in the short term, we're gonna be turning that around at Reynolds Community College. We're working with them right now on that partnership. They're very excited. We're very excited to finally get decent transit service to Reynolds Community College, with ultimate expansion up to Virginia Center Commons or even just into the Hanover side of the line for this service. So that's the exciting piece of it. We're participating in the north-south BRT study, which will kind of determine where does BRT service go and then transition to local service. I know a lot of the focus is kind of where is it going to go, which way through downtown. They're looking at all the different options you see marked on here, as well as the different directions it can go once it's in Chesterfield. We've been pretty consistent on our identification of the Brook Road corridor, Route 1 corridor is our focus for the next extension of transit service in the county. So timing on extension up to Virginia Center Commons and then other connections is still kind of in flux. We know the redevelopment of the Virginia Center Commons area with the athletic mixed-use space up there coming online starting next year. Probably within the next 2 years, we'll have that service extension up to VCC area. And again, that's all easy connections to Green City for the most part. So one of our interim options for as Green City continues to come out of the ground to get service to the other side of the interstate from the Route 1 service is via microtransit. I assume y'all have some knowledge of what microtransit is and that we do have some pilot projects coming in the region. This is probably a year 2 to 3 timeframe service area if again, depending on the timing of when it comes out the ground. Right now, there's really nothing back there to serve. But this would give us an opportunity to make that connection from the Green City area to the fixed route service on Route 1. So that may be an interim solution. You can see kind of the cluster of the darker colors in the northern part of the county. So that area did fare well with the analysis of corridors that would benefit from microtransit. So. Next opportunity, actually let me back up to the transit piece. So obviously the goal is to have connectivity other than just north-south along Brook Road. Ultimately, as Virginia Center develops, we'll have service there, but as Green City develops, we want to have ultimately a fixed route service to Green City. What's identified in the region's transit vision plan and what I think is going to probably become a priority for us over the next few years is kind of a radial route that will run along East Parham Road, so that it would be anchored by Green City to the east, run along the Parham corridor, connect to obviously the service on Brook, connect to Reynolds College, connect to the government center complex at Staples Mill in Parham, connect to Henrico Doctors Hospital, connect to all the commercial development as you go towards Broad Street, connect to service along Broad, which we're currently working also on extension of the Pulse BRT, whether phase 1 takes us out to Parham or somewhere closer to Glenside. Ultimately, we'll have a connection of high quality service along along Broad Street with service along Parham, which that would continue down ultimately to probably the Regency area and give us a very nice kind of radial route connecting all those areas. So moving to the bike head connectivity piece of it, I'm sure everybody knows about the fall line. The good news is the fall line is very close to Green City. Again, not you can't reach out and touch it from there, but it's close enough. So our focus right now is getting fall line built. We have about 7.5 miles of it in Henrico. Estimated cost about $53 million. It's fully funded. We're in right away for most of the 7 phases we're administering, which is basically taking us from Bryan Park connecting all the way up to the design build piece that VDOT is doing to cross the Chickahominy and go through Hanover to connect to Ashland. So we're in right-of-way acquisition for most of our phases right now, with first piece going under construction probably by this fall. Everything else will be under construction next year and completion by either late 2025 or 2026, again, ahead of the Green City schedule. So not just focusing on the linear piece of the fall line, but all the connectivity related to it. You can see the Green City label kind of mid graphic there. So we have that connection that's funded, we're working on. We have the Magellan Parkway extension, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, but that will have bike ped facilities on it. We'll have a spur off to Reynolds Community College. We haven't started on that one yet, but that one's a priority. We'll have a direct connection to Lewis Skinner, and then looking to the north, we're working on a trail right now for connection to VCC. And as that redevelops, that will have bike ped facilities internal to the development as well. We're even having conversations with Hanover to look at that connection between the VCC area up into Hanover for bikes as well, because Fall Line is a little bit further west than there. And we'll have a direct connection via trail facilities, some of which are already built, between VCC and the Fall Line just south of the Chickahominy River, and then that trail continues down Woodman Road Extended, and we have a funded project that will add a second point of access to Glover Park that will also have a trail, which hopefully will be under construction later this year. So a lot of connectivity. I think one of the lessons learned on the Capitol Trail was, it's a great facility, but it doesn't really connect to a lot of other things once you kind of get out of the city. So we're kind of filling in those pieces. The first piece was a connection up into Dory Park in 2 phases. We're working on another one right now for connection to Verona High School. So lesson learned is we want to get those connections in with the Fall Line as soon as possible, if not directly with the project soon after. So that's a focus there. The other lesson learned on the Capitol Trail for the county was we want to get our trailheads with our bathrooms in place on the front end. So we have 2 major trailheads planned with that project, as well as 9 minor trailheads. So the connection to Green City, the trail connection will be what we were calling the Garden City Connector Trail. Garden City has historical significance because it was a prominent African American development from the mid to early 20th century that kind of occupied much of this area. So that's roughly a 2/3 of a mile trail connecting Green City to the Fall Line. And mentioning the trailheads, right where the Garden City Trail connects to the Fall Line just north of Hungry Road, there will be a major trailhead with somewhere between 30 and 40 parking spaces, restrooms, and other facilities, water refill stations. So that's funded and under design now. In fact, we've already purchased the property for that trailhead kind of behind the Food Lion Shopping Center, if y'all are familiar with where that is. So that schedule for that really is driven in part because we have to put in a new bridge over 95. If y'all are familiar with the current Scott Road Bridge, just north of Parham, if you're coming down from Ashland, you see a broken bridge that's has construction, barricades around it. It was hit by about 5 to 6 different trucks over the last dozen years, the last one being fatal. That hit it so hard that the first beam that you would get to coming down 95 southbound lowered the entire beam by several inches. It was already an under-height bridge. So that is now permanently closed and will be coming down later this year. So in place of that will be innovative pedestrian bike bridge. We're probably gonna take out some of the angle of the current bridge. It's a very skewed bridge right now, so obviously if we straighten it up a little bit, it's cheaper and easier to build. Part of the effort for carbon capture and low environmental impact, the developer is working with us to do a timber structure bridge using a technology called Lulum, which is basically almost like a glued plywood type concept, but at a higher level. It's very common in Northern Europe. There's a number of structures in Canada, very few in the US. So actually the consultant they brought in to work with us on is out of Canada, I think Vancouver area of Canada. So our challenge is getting VDOT to approve an innovative structure that's never been used over an interstate anywhere in the United States and be first in Virginia. So fingers crossed on that. We're beginning those conversations now that we have a comfort level with it, which we do. Because it's a bike and pedestrian bridge, it's, doesn't have to carry the same weight as a vehicular bridge. The county's going to install it and maintain it, but VDOT needs a comfort level that's something that won't fall down on the interstate, rightfully so. So we'll see what happens with that. At a minimum, if VDOT says no to timber bridge, we will do something that's kind of a gateway into the county, has a nice visual appeal to it rather than just your standard chain link fencing as you go on the interstate. So the Sky Road Bridge is being replaced by an extension of Magellan Parkway and road. So right now, that road kind of ends at the edge of that office development I mentioned. So there's about a 2/3 mile extension of that going in part through the horse cow pasture I mentioned. And a new bridge over 95, less than a half a mile north of the Scott Road Bridge. If y'all are familiar with that part of the county, it will come out, actually the road's already built by the developer on the very western edge of it, but by the DMV that either is closing or has just closed up in northern Henrico. That's where that road will come out. So that facility is roughly $27 million. It's funded and is in right-of-way phase right now. So again, our schedule is to be ahead of anything coming online with the development to have that roadway network in place. This is a graphic of what the bridge will look like that will also have a pedestrian trail connecting up into the kind of northern middle section of Green City, connecting over to Route 1 corridor, which is quickly redeveloping in light of all of the excitement around Green City. So we're assuming that over time, it's kind of an older, underutilized section of Route 1, kind of between Parham and 295. There's some old motels and old underutilized buildings. As that redevelops, we're likely going to have the opportunity to continue that trail network across Route 1 to connect to the fall line a little bit further up than the lower connection. So
Hey, Todd, what kind of width do you expect on that?
on which thing, the
On
trail?
Yeah, on the trail.
This trail will be 10 feet.
I mean, on the bridge in particular.
Oh, total width of the bridge?
Yeah, it's going to be more than the sidewalk.
Yeah, it'll be a trail on one side, it's 10 feet.
Okay.
12 feet where you have the parapet walls.
Good.
The other side has sidewalk on the approach, and I think we stop at least short term before you get on the rise of the bridge, but we'll have sidewalk on the other side. But the focus is try to keep all the pedestrians and cyclists on the south side. That will connect into our shared use path once you get to the east side of the bridge, and then the kind of over wide section of pavement that exists already down Dominion and kind of going towards the eastern end of the office park, we're going to convert to buffered bike lanes. So a lot of trail bike lane connectivity as well as sidewalks.
Thanks.
So that project, like I said, we're very excited about. That should be going under construction middle of next year, latter part of next year, completion in likely late 2025. And you'll notice on the bottom, we specifically mentioned the clearance height. So I think the minimum is somewhere around 15 and a half, 16 feet. Our goal is to have extra clearance beyond that in case something random happens, which has happened multiple times at Scott Road Bridge, where a dump truck comes down the highway with its bed up. That's happened. Hit it once. Piece of construction equipment on the back, the arm was too high, that hit it once. So margin of error. For reference, the Scott Road Bridge at its lowest was about 14.2 inches, and the Parham Bridge is only about 14.4. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So total infrastructure for supporting Green City and the general area that is a county investment. You can see the three projects, two of which I mentioned, they're already program funded, the Magellan Bridge, Garden City, but we also have project funded through CBTA regional money for road improvements kind of south of Parham between Villa Park and Hilliard. We're going to realign the intersection of Lakeside Avenue, if you're familiar with that. And that's also the section of Brook Road where the Fall Line Trail will be running adjacent to. Two other projects that we're working on, concepts and funding. East Parham Road improvements, we had submitted that for Smart Scale this last round. It just missed getting funded. That will improve the intersection at Brook and Parham, amongst other things, give us better pedestrian connectivity. And then the interchange of I-95 and East Parham. I'm going to go back and talk off of this earlier slide. So anybody that's been through that interchange realizes it's not like other interchanges. Not in a good way. It preceded current interstate design standards, so your radiuses on those loops are very tight. And as I mentioned, the bridges are too low. So VDOT just funded a study that should be starting up this summer to look at redoing that interchange. Likely it will come out as a diverging diamond interchange, which actually is a little tighter footprint and gives us better opportunities to get bikes and pedestrians across the bridge. I used to come that way to work almost every day, and it would be the odd day I did not see somebody either trying to walk across the interchange or ride a bike across the interchange. Not safe, not good, so we'll make sure we have that pedestrian connection. So even though you'll have a pedestrian connection just to the north at the Scott Road Bridge location, people tend to, especially if you're walking, you're gonna go to point, so you're not gonna walk a half mile up the through the development to get to another bridge and then walk back down. So it's important to have all of these as safe as possible for bikes and pedestrians.
Will the main entrances into the development
Yeah.
be Brook Road and Parham?
Yeah, main entrances will be two along Parham Road east of 95. That's the section that developer will be improving. They'll be adding a traffic signal. There'll be a public road kind of extending off of St. Charles Road, I believe, and as well as sidewalk along Parham. And then the secondary entrance will be that Magellan access to the north. So obviously, when you have a 17,000 seat arena, you want good access from multiple locations. So in fact, we worked with VDOT this last year on a safety study to look at the entirety of the corridor. So we looked at Parham Road from 301 all the way down to Brook, and Brook all the way down to the city limits, and actually a little bit beyond, to figure out what do we need to do. And that's where a couple of these projects came from. But the interchange was kind of left out as this is a bigger study than what we can do with this study. So that time is of the essence on getting that figured out and funded.
Is that a star
Todd,
study?
while you're on that screen, you see that they're really, to be that big of a project, it's fairly isolated in regards to entrances.
Yes.
One entrance would be at Charles, and as a matter of fact, my daughter lives at the corner of Charles and 2 streets in. Obviously, that's gotta be lights and et cetera.
Correct.
But it looks like there's only 2 ways of getting in and out, the Magellan Parkway and Parham Road.
Right.
And when you've got an event that's got 17,000 seats in it, and if you know anything about where Parham Road goes to and where Magellan dumps into on Brook Road, that's already under-designed for traffic of that major amount. Has there been any, I'm sure there's been consideration of producing some way of getting in and out from the east and from the north? Because all of it's dumping to the west, and it's gonna create major backups to the west and on 95, which is blocked most of the time anyhow. Sure.
So all valid points. There was a thorough traffic study done with the development that basically loaded it up. We had done a separate study even prior to the Green City development coming in to basically take the entire area, including what's still the horse farm, and load it up with as much traffic as models would allow us to see what worked and what didn't work. That's what drove the design width for the Magellan Bridge. Brook Road through there is 6 lanes and very low volume, so it has the capacity once we get people onto Brook Road from Magellan, which will be a signal. 295 is just to the north, so there's kind of your radial access to the north. To the east, Parham connects directly with 301. 301 connects, just to the north with 295, and to the south back to 95. So I think really our biggest challenge again is this interchange. Once we get that to higher capacity, nothing we're looking at shows us that there will be any significant bottlenecks. Obviously, Henrico County, through our traffic group and our police, have managed what was, until NASCAR lost popularity, the largest sporting event in the state of Virginia, with over 110,000 people at Richmond Raceway on roads that hadn't yet been improved. We're just now starting to improve Richmond Henrico Turnpike. And it functions. So obviously there's going to be a lot of police traffic control when you're dumping 17,000 people out of an arena. That you have that no matter where you go. But on a daily basis, traffic should flow fine. Again, the other emphasis is other modes of travel. It's highly possible and hopefully will be encouraged that you'll have a bike network connection to the arena, so people that live within biking distance will be able to bike there, park their bikes.
What about people coming from out of town?
Yes.
Wanting to take Amtrak? So they're either getting off in Ashland or they're getting off at Staples Mill. How have you thought about how to move those people into the arena
Right, so
at various times of the afternoon
So-
or whatever?
So ultimately that, again, the public transit component with the service we'll be adding on Parham Road, that will connect to the service on Staples Mill with the reconfigured Route 18.
That'll go to Amtrak?
That would go to Amtrak, yeah. Unfortunately, that would be a connection. What we're quietly looking at right now is revisiting the station location of the Amtrak station. We had formerly looked at a site in conjunction with Department of Rail back in 2008, 2009, of relocating along the Parham corridor. For political reasons, that died, but we I guess pulled that back out from the trash bin and are relooking at it in light of these opportunities. And Green City is very aware of that passenger rail connection and supportive of us finding even better connection than we have now. Right now, it's maybe a 10-minute drive from Green City to Staples Mill Station.
Right.
Transit doesn't exist now, but when that does exist, that would be a a manageable connection, but obviously if we're able to locate the station about a mile to the north, you'd have a direct connection, so.
What kind of traffic would support a light rail system?
A lot more than we have.
Okay.
Um,
Because that's sort of been a hot button for this committee for a number of years, that we always take into consideration other transportation modes. You're not going to get enough people to ride their bicycles there
No.
to create any challenges in regards to traffic patterns, that type of thing. But if you have something other than bus, which gets caught up in traffic and stuff and really doesn't save you much time, a light rail system like they've got in Norfolk, and Virginia Beach.
Right, well, that's probably a whole nother topic of
That's another conversation,
but-
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, never rule it out, it's, very, very cost challenging to put light rail in. BRT is kind of light rail light, right, is sort of a, initially it was thought of as kind of baby steps to get to light rail, but in reality, just because of the cost of implementing light rail, a lot of regions have gone to BRT as the end product. Certainly light rail would potentially be a consideration if costs were manageable, but I think focusing on good, high quality transit is, probably a more realistic solution.
What about dedicated bus lanes on these potential BRT corridors?
Either designated bus lanes or signal, priorities, especially up Route 1 corridor. So right now, the lower part of Route 1 through the county has only 2 lanes in each direction. So probably taking 1 lane out for transit isn't viable, but having signal priority and queue jumping for the buses would certainly be a starting point.
Todd, there wasn't anything shown on any of the diagrams alluding to parking.
So there's a question, will there be parking? Yes.
Well, I'm sure there'll be parking, but there wasn't anything color-wise or anything else talking about parking within the confines.
Especially with the arena, talk about that, is there gonna be a
Under
deck,
the solar,
how many
yeah.
spaces?
Yes, so they haven't designed it yet, so we don't know, how big the structured parking will be. But obviously there'll be adequate parking per county requirements. I didn't really spend much time talking about parking because parking's not that exciting, right? But yeah, I mean, the parking that was shown with the reimagination of best products headquarters already has surface parking around it. My guess is they potentially go to structured parking on at least some of that.
I mean, I don't know anything about Coliseums, what's the rule of thumb there? 0.5x, 0.6x or parking to capacity, or?
I don't have that memorized, Champ. We haven't built an arena yet, so
Well, yeah.
we'll figure it out before we get there. But I don't know how big the Siegel Center is at VCU. That's maybe 9,000. So we're roughly twice that size with this arena.
And the more public transportation you have, the less
Oh, no,
parking.
yeah, but
Yeah.
I didn't see that in particular on the diagram there, but that's gotta be a lot of acreage.
Yeah,
Big
but
Coliseum like
and
that.
I think that's why they'll probably focus on structured parking.
Yeah.
As much as not. So.
Any other questions? Let's see, show of hands. Sarah?
Yeah, maybe you mentioned this, but regarding the residential units, how many units are gonna be on there?
Approved at zoning was just over 2,100 units. Those numbers, like I said, are a little squishy. It may go up as high as 2,400 units. Most of that is either multifamily or condos, townhouses. The number for the single family was very low. It was approved at zoning.
Are those gonna be, like, you have workplaces in there and then residential, is the residential gonna be so that those people can work in those workplaces? Do you know what?
That's always the goal, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, mixed use development,
That's what I'm asking.
depending on where it is and how it's marketed has been.
I guess also what I'm asking is it gonna be mixed income, like if I work in the arena, can I live there?
Yeah, so the developer has talked about affordable housing component without any details. That is a huge priority for the county right now, is affordable housing and workforce housing.
Yeah.
That was a huge topic at our board retreat this past year. And actually the county's starting to implement some of that. So I'm sure that will be ongoing conversation to have workforce housing as part of the development, as well as just across 95, there's a lot of residential mixed-use development coming in, so lots of opportunities. And again, that's all within a half mile of this facility that will be accessible via transit, bike, pet connections.
Next, Ken had a question?
Yeah, a couple questions. Todd, how does the size of the proposed arena compare with John Paul Jones in Charlottesville, number one? And secondly, any sort of synergies or connections between the project that Henrico has underway at Virginia Center Commons, with the sports complex there, and any connections or synergies?
So
with Green
John
City?
Paul Jones, I don't know the seating capacity of that, but just based on my experience there, it's a lot smaller, probably not a lot bigger than the Siegel Center, if that big. I haven't Googled that though. Last time I went there was a Dave Matthews concert, and I was standing in a haze of smoke in the middle, so I couldn't see the top. Regarding synergies with VCC, absolutely. VCC is further along because we the county is constructing that in conjunction with our Sports and Entertainment Authority, and that's already getting booked for major tournaments and stuff years out. So this is part of that kind of whole central part of the county, sports complex between VCC, Gulliver Park, which is not far to the north and west, and this facility. Their goal is to be able to get NCAA level tournament championships at this facility, and then do that in partnership with all of our other facilities. The other thing about this arena, it's supposed to be a very flexible space, so the seating can be moved around. You can have multiple venues in there for events and competitions and so forth. So yeah, the county very much has an eye towards the whole sports tourism component.
All right,
John Paul
Champ?
Jones is 14.6.
14.6?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed it was that big, but yeah.
Okay, Champ, you're next.
Yeah, same thing. I was thinking the same way, that if you've got Virginia Center Commons and access capacity, I assume most of that's gonna be at night. Is there the ability to work in partner, say, with GRTC to run shuttles back and forth? And those active conversations going on to do that for creative solutions to parking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if we have transit that's running up the Route 1 corridor of VCC, keep in mind that most of the parking VCC is going away as part of that redevelopment process. They'll still have surface parking related to the facility there, but most of that site is going to be mixed use.
Or maybe J. Sargent Reynolds, at night.
J. Sarge is not far away. You have a lot of commercial up and down that corridor, so I think shuttling is certainly a viable option.
Trying to get my
Wait,
arm,
Wait a
sorry.
minute, we have Michael next. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you all for asking questions that I don't need to ask, so I'm gonna ask something different. This body and this building is the place where we need to be discussing projects like this in terms of how the region responds to global warming and lowering our carbon footprint. All the time I'm thinking about an arena on the periphery of the central business district and the existing infrastructure for transit. I'm thinking, every time we have a project like this around the region, do we even look at whether vehicle miles traveled or passenger miles traveled are being lowered, or what the mode share between transit and the private automobile is going to be? So I'm up about 3,000, maybe even 20,000 feet, thinking about this project in terms of the broader perspective that our planning and our regional governments need to be thinking right now. That wasn't a question.
I was gonna say, I'm trying
You
to
can respond
parse
to
a
me
question out of that.
You can respond to me if you want to.
Sure, I'll be glad to. So, I guess two perspectives on this. If you live in the Richmond region right now and you want to go to a major concert, you're driving to DC, Philly, Charlotte. So you're eliminating that. Secondly, regarding, I guess if your observation is this isn't in the central business district, it's in the suburbs. So actually this development came out of following the failure of the city of Richmond to pass Navy Hill. This was the arena was originally going to go downtown, and for whatever reason it didn't work out. So when that deal fell through, again, as I mentioned, we were trying to find a use for this site and contacted the developer and said, this is what we have. So the good news is it's right along the 95 corridor. Henrico County is the second largest employer in the entire state of Virginia. So we have a large population of residents. We have an even larger population of employees. So it's not like you're out in King William or somewhere. I'll pick something outside of our region. Dropping a facility there, you're putting it in one of the busiest interchanges in the region that's centrally located, at least in the northern part of the region, and accessible from the south via 95, from 295. And again, we focus on transit connectivity. Just because it doesn't exist there now doesn't mean it won't be there.
Faith?
Yeah, I would, when it comes to transit accessibility, have you guys set a goal of the frequency as far as 30 minutes every hour?
So right now, if I recall, the Route 1 is 15 to 20 minute headway. It's one of the better service routes in the system. So I would anticipate that will continue as that Route 1 service moves north. And again, that's a direct connection to downtown and Chesterfield with extension down there. So, and again, as that connects with BRT, we'll even have better service.
What about to the sports center off of Brook?
That will be the basically phase 2 of that extension will just be further up Route 1 and it will either turn around, that will be the end of the line, either at VCC or like I said, possibly we're looking at crossing over onto the Hanover side as that area develops along that Route 1 corridor.
Okay, thank you. Upton, did you have a question?
Just looking at, trying to get my arms around this rendering that we're looking at right now. This looks like the original rendering and doesn't incorporate the 100-acre farm north of it. Is that correct?
This is the rendering of the lower part of it. That's the more the commercial arena. The upper part, which is kind of that upper piece of this green portion of the graphic, that's the residential.
Is that what's planned north of it?
That's more residential and more passive kind of area just based on the terrain and the ecology of the area. So there are renderings kind of thrown in that do show the residential, but not the full graphic of it.
Correct. Thank you, Todd.
Yep.
All of this land is currently forested, right?
Part of it is, part of it's open field. There's some wetlands out there, which is driving some of the green space requirements.
Okay, Champion.
Just a quick one, Todd. I'm trying to get my head wrapped around the arena and the impact. By comparison, what's capacity at Innsbruck when they have a show out there? Any idea?
My guess is 5,000 to 6,000.
Okay. So I was trying to think about congestion. People are obviously using the parking at the office buildings and things like that.
Okay, any other questions? Todd, this is a very exciting proposal. Glad to hear more about it, and I think that it would be a big lift for the entire Richmond region, I think.
Like I said, we're excited about it. We wish it was moving a little faster, but we understand all the external factors. But yeah, it's certainly gonna be a driver for redevelopment along much of that corridor through there and synergies with the other developments.
Or something other than a warehouse.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, actually, I met with the first, the developer that's doing more of the residential piece several years ago, and they were looking at, data farm up there.
Really?
Which, there's mixed feelings on data farms, right? They generate a lot of tax revenue, but at the same time, they also are huge energy users.
And water users.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so water users, so flip that, and this is kind of the opposite. It's revenue generating development that that looks to minimize environmental impacts.
And I think elevates quality of life components as well. So other than a data farm that is just a consumer and doesn't provide anything in return.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you don't get a lot of traffic congestion with
Yeah.
the data farm, but you also don't have the opportunities that the facilities like this will provide.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay.
Glad to be invited.
So we will await more updates anxiously.
Stay tuned.
Okay. All right, well, we are moving along here on our agenda. And anyway, we'll move to the chair's report. And we have one item of business here, and that is to elect new officers. So there is a rotation among the participating localities in the CTAC or the TPO region. And the rotation is that as I rotate off as New Kent's representative, the next up would be City of Richmond, and Sarah Erickson will move from vice chair to chair, and she's agreed to that. If there are no other nominations, we will elect Sarah in just a moment. We also have in our rotation, the next one up would be Henrico County, and as you heard Todd say, they don't have a representative at this point, so they have to wait until their Board of Supervisors nominates somebody to serve on CTAC. So whenever that person is identified, that would be the next vice chair. So that's a placeholder for now, it's just a blank. So, but if Sarah's ready to step into it, would you like to say a few things, Sarah, before we actually vote you in?
I don't have much to say. I mean, I really appreciate all the work that you've done in kind of investigating what we want the CTAC's role to be in like the greater scheme of things. I'm interested in exploring that more, and working on that. I did have a question. Does it only rotate between the localities? It doesn't rotate between
Correct.
other folks on the committee?
Correct.
For the chair and vice chair is correct,
Yeah.
it's just localities.
Okay.
And there is an established order of rotation, it's spelled out in what we call a non-binding document. And the document actually stipulates that the New Kent representative is to be followed by representatives from Powhatan. But Powhatan,
Or Richmond, right? And then-
Richmond,
Yeah,
then Powhatan, then Hanover, then Henrico. We've been unsuccessful in finding representatives from Powhatan and Hanover to serve at this point. So I moved to Henrico. At this point, Henrico doesn't have a representative, but I've been in communication with their staff and asked them to work with the board to see if they can, designate somebody. So we won't leave you hanging.
okay, well, without any objection, we can, I'll entertain a motion to elect Sarah as our next chair, and then a second to that, please.
I move that we elect Sarah Erickson as our incoming chair.
All right, it's been moved,
Second.
it's been seconded. All those in favor of electing Sarah as our next chair, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Sarah, you've been duly elected. Congratulations. And then I don't have anything else for a chair's report. We're going to get into the CTAC TPO Policy Board discussion under other business. So at this moment, we'll turn to Chet. Glad you could join us, Chet, and talk a little bit about the TPO updates.
Sure. I wanted to kind of highlight the CBTA activities. There is a report on page 7 in the agenda packet. Lots of work going on. The big items, the Technical Advisory Committee has been working for probably 6 to 9 months on suggested changes to the project selection and evaluation criteria. There were some concerns among locality staff that the projects that had bubbled to the top through the application process weren't as representative of the entire region as they could be. So they've been working very diligently to try and massage or update the criteria in regional project selection so that it was a better representation of the entire region. And it's tough because there are, as with any transportation projects, there's way more need than there is funding. So there's a level where you get a good number of projects that are highlighted, and then an inch later, it goes to hundreds of projects that you have no chance of covering the need for. So that's going to continue to be an iterative process where the TAC takes a look at all the criteria and the possible projects, and now we have past applications. So we have a track record to go back on to see how different projects performed. So that's something that the authority took action on, and it was a huge lift for the TAC. The other exciting thing, I guess, kind of following up on, especially on the fall line highlights that Todd just shared, there are standard project agreements that are signed and in place for particular segments of the fall line. Those are the first regionally significant projects that are kind of coming off the books. And basically what that means is the SBA authorizes, in this case in Henrico County, to go ahead and expend funds. And there's a reimbursement process that's now accepted and in place so that CBTA can reimburse for the cost for those regionally approved projects. So all the background is now in place for those types of transactions to happen. And we have a standard template now for all kinds of projects. It just so happened that the fall line was the first thing to come off the table. But so anytime there are highway projects or transit projects or other bike ped projects, they'll all follow a similar type of process. So yeah, that's really exciting. We continue to work. The Finance Committee is looking at the utility of entering the bond market and kind of making sure that the CBTA is in a place where it's comfortable with a change in direction like that. Up until this point, all the projects that have been approved for regional basically based on what's in the bank. Out of all of the taxes that have been collected for the past 2.5 years, the 47 projects that have been identified so far have all been identified to be paid through just the regular income that's coming into the CBTA. As more and more projects and higher cost projects like a north-south BRT or an interchange or other kinds of things come up, there's going to be a need at some point for additional access to funding. So CBTA has the statutory authority to take on debt and to issue debt, and I think they're being very careful and deliberate in making sure that everything is ready for that when the time comes. We are looking ahead now to probably an August timeframe for the next round of applications for regional funding will open. So far, we've had 2 rounds of funding, and I would say that probably about $400 million worth of projects have been funded through those first 2 rounds. And we'll continue we're in a place now where we're starting to get the ball rolling and get comfortable with the process. Can those projects in those applications, are those being fully funded every time, or are there partial fundings that can be like leveraged in statewide applications?
Yeah, that's a great question.
some of the projects, the smaller scale projects, can be fully funded. For the most part, the CBTA has used the leveraging opportunities, especially when like a locality is, Chesterfield County is competing for smart scale funds. We can leverage CBTA dollars and take down that total cost so that the cost benefit is a lot more appealing to VDOT and well, now we're hoping to use that same type of approach for federal grant applications through the BIL and a lot of those funds that are available. So it depends.
Sure.
Thank you, Chad.
Sure.
All right, moving ahead, we will take a look at what's next on the agenda, and that is, we want to talk about the meeting that we had with the TPO Policy Board. And that was held on May 18th. As you all know, that was when we had our scheduled meeting, and so we got bumped to today. So thank you for being part of today's meeting that was not originally on the schedule. But we had a productive meeting, and I want to thank Upton and Sarah and John Easter for being present for that meeting that was here on the 18th. And we each spoke about some of our points of concern and recommendations for how we might work more effectively with the TPO Policy Board. And some of you, Mr. Holland, and you might want to comment on that as we go along. But anyway, we shared some of your concerns that had been raised about how we could have a more meaningful role and how we could partner more effectively to bring in the public and to share ideas and to think about how we can do more public outreach in our various localities or within our organizations. So we also talked about how difficult it has been. We've tried very hard to recruit representatives from every locality and every organization and expanded the number of organizations in adherence to our desire to represent more of the elderly and disabled communities and others who have been underrepresented. And we have been successful in bringing in additional organizations, RVA Rapid Transit, Senior Connections, a number of others that had not been a part of this process. So they wanted to get involved to have some meaningful participation and to affect change. While we love these presentations that we receive at these meetings and we feel that we're much more informed, we want to put that knowledge to use by actually working to share that information with our communities and at the same time gather up their concerns and bring them back to the policy board so that they would be more aware of what the community concerns are and what the priorities might be. So with that, Upton, I would ask you to share some of your thoughts about the meeting, and Sarah, you as well, and just share some things, and then we'll talk about what we might expect going forward.
Not surprising, we were welcomed gracefully at TPO. The chairman, Mr. Lumpkins, who's on video with us, as well as Mr. Holland and all the others, were very receptive of the comments that we had. I guess the challenge that we have and have had for years is creating a method of living up to the moniker that we live with, and that's the Community Transportation Advisory Committee. And we've been challenged trying to figure out how we can be in an advisory position and to whom. The assumption is we would be in an advisory committee to the TPO. That being said, TAC, which creates a lot of the conversation that is had at the TPO, the Transportation Advisory Committee is made up, if I understand correctly, of the professional planners from all of our regions. So those planners get together and they basically represent the transportation needs at a high level in TAC, and the recommendations then are passed on to TPO. Our job would be representing our citizens, and I think we did an excellent job over the last couple of years of broadening that representation around this table. two ideas that I came up with, or we came up with, was one, perhaps having an annual workshop between, including the TPO members and the CTAC members, where we would be talking about the things that are coming before TPO in a broad picture. The conversation about long-range planning. We ought to be actively involved from a community perspective in advising in regard pertaining to long-range planning. That is a double-edged sword in that we then would have to go to our community people, the people that we represent, whether it be the people riding bicycles, the people taking, quote, high-speed rail, the elderly, the disabled, the mobility issue challenged people, and talking with them and representing them to the long-range planning ideas and saying the community wants to see more of this, wants to see the ideas, et cetera. So we take on more responsibility because we would then have to be responsible for those folks. Sitting around the table talking about long-range plans and telling TPO and telling TAC what we get from the grassroots. The other suggestion was exactly as we see today, that Mr. Holland, Mr. Lumpkins, both are committed to ensuring that there be better communication between the Transportation Policy Organization and CTAC. And I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions that we might have. You may know that the chairperson of our committee has a seat, non-voting seat, on the TPO. And that's an added additional meeting that our chairperson has. But thank you, Mr. Holland, thank you, Mr. Lumpkins, both for taking on that challenge and fulfilling it. We appreciate that.
Thank you, Upton, and I would just add that Mr. Canova Peterson, who is the incoming chair of the TPO Policy Board, has indicated an interest in working together. And Sarah, I think he said that he would welcome an opportunity to meet with you, and maybe y'all could brainstorm some ideas about next steps for the coming year and how to structure something, because I think we're all willing, but we didn't really have a targeted activity. So other than meeting for the organizational members, meeting with RVA Rapid Transit Board, meeting with the Virginia Conservation Network Board and their committee structure, those of us that represent localities, unless we partner with our representative in a town hall meeting or something like that, often there's no structure. So maybe thinking about ways to structure, to have both the CTAC and the TPO members partnering more actively, I think might accomplish some of that. Did you want to add to that?
No, I don't think I have much to add. I think it's a good idea, to maybe reach directly between locality representatives. Being like the city of Richmond, I don't know where I would go as my first step to talk to all of the people of the city of Richmond to get a check on what they feel about, various projects. But I would like to know what maybe everyone in this room or even online feels about what our role should be, or how you envision giving feedback looking like. Should we, I guess we're gonna continue this structure of having a presentation of our choosing, but then what do we advise on and how? I guess.
Mr. Holland,
Well,
would you like
thank
to
you.
comment?
Well,
No.
great. Well, thank you so very much for inviting me here today to be with you. I greatly appreciate it. And we appreciate your chair serving on the TPO. And I recall we did have a discussion, and Chet may be knowledgeable of as well, regarding your role and the advisory nature of this committee. And we the TPO, is my understanding, feels, because it's also pursuant to our bylaws, that we have advisory and information from you and vice versa to you as well. That should be an integral part of communications, sharing and information between the two groups. And so, from my perspective, advisory, so certainly reaching out to community advocates, organizations, you are a part of organizations in the community that can be, again, very helpful to the TPO itself. But advisory certainly, and I think communication is one of the key to that. And that came out very clear in our TPO meeting as we discussed the very foundation of CTAC, why is it in place? What's the purpose? And advisory seemed to be critical and a major part of what we see as a part of CTAC. So again, integral part of what we do. And I think it's hard to break it out in components, but as we communicate and share topics, ideas, and projects, I think it can be of help to the TPO. And Chet may recall, I think he's quite knowledgeable of the bylaw component. It's been a while since I've heard it discussed it, but that did come up as well, the statutory requirement of CTAC.
Thank you. Mr. Lumpkins, if you're still with us, would you like to offer any insights?
Yes, thank you. I've enjoyed joining you remotely, and yeah, it's broader on the TPO. I know Mr. Hodges, he sent me a message the other day that he was looking forward to joining, but something came up. But I think it's across all the TPO policy board members. There's certainly a desire to learn, to engage more with you all and to learn how we can utilize you all in a positive way. I would say from my discussions with the policy board members, the question that you asked a little bit ago to your group is where I think we would like to start, is you all coming to us and saying, these are some thoughts that you all have, versus us trying to come up with some things. I think if you all can, and I heard some things at our May meeting that I thought will be well received. So if you all can continue in that direction and come up with some suggestions to present to us, I think that'll get a good discussion started on the policy board side. But there's certainly a strong desire to find a way to tap into all the connections and all the views that you all will bring to the policy board.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think the joint workshop, having an annual joint workshop idea is great. And I think having the policy board members here with us to kind of get a sense of what our thinking is very valuable. And maybe it's as simple as starting out with planning that workshop and then touching base with everybody could, maybe not on a formal basis, but staying in touch with their TPO policy board member throughout the year instead of just working in separate silos. With an effort toward that would begin to maybe identify some other ways to collaborate.
Madam Chairman, really, while we have you all here, I'd like to really get a point of clarification, a point of information. And I want to say first, I've been on CTAC for probably 20 years now, and I tell you, it's been a real honor. We've got a lot of talent here, people that are content experts in a lot of areas of transportation. This is not just kind of a casual, how nice it is. There's a lot of brain power here, and I'm honored to be part of that. That said, I think all of my colleagues take the advisory role very seriously. We are asked as an advisory committee to make recommendations, and that's what we're charged with doing. But to do that, is it appropriate, for example, I've had conversations with various TAG members, they've always been accommodating for me there. But is it appropriate, for example, if there's something that we want to formally advise TAC on, for us, for example, to pass a motion, to take a vote and make that recommendation formally following Robert's rules? Is that acceptable to everyone? And can we agree that that would be an appropriate vehicle for doing that? Or Chet?
Chet, comment on that. Policy, bylaw.
I think that, I think one note to make before I answer that question is that there are very few MPOs in the state of Virginia that have citizen advisory committees.
Good for us.
So we have an opportunity here to kind of step out and do kind of chart our own path as a CTAC. So the bylaws do not, I don't believe that they set up a voting structure for CTAC. It's advisory in nature. I think if that would help to focus efforts, then I don't see a huge issue with it. I would probably want to get reinforcement from legal counsel just on the interpretation of the bylaws and whether there's a voting structure that could be implemented. I'm not sure it's necessary, but if it helps the committee function, then I don't think it should be off the table.
I mean, conceptually, does that sound like a reasonable approach for you all?
Conceptual, to me, conceptually, it does. I mean, if you're advisory, then certainly you have recommendations and ideas that should be considered and that we would love to evaluate. And I think that's the nature of having all this information and knowledge is to utilize it. And however you do it in terms of procedures and policies, I mean, to me, it's not that critical. I think the key is to convey that information. And I know our chair, Mr. Lumpkins, may have a better appeal from his position as chair, but certainly I see the conveying of information is critically important. However you want to do it is up to your committee, I believe.
To me, that sounds like a model that's perhaps like a planning commission and board of supervisors, is that if there's something you feel strongly about, you wanna make a motion, and the rest of the CTAC votes on it affirmatively, and then it's relayed to the board, they can examine it and decide whether they want to accept that proposal or not and move forward with it.
And if CTAC doesn't agree with you, they can vote it down and that's the end of it. Absolutely.
All right.
Can I make one
Yes,
other
Jeff.
point? I don't know why, but I'm stuck on one of Sarah's comments from earlier about how do I communicate with the whole city of Richmond.
Right, yeah.
I don't think that, I want to make clear that I don't think anybody expects members of this committee to do something like that. I mean, volunteers around the table, right?
Yeah.
So this is something where you've been identified for a particular passion or role or fit in a different organization in the region, and you have a network that you regularly communicate. I think that's all that's expected is that, you know, Faith has a huge network that's already built up. I don't think you're expected to go outside of that. I think you're here because you can reach a lot of people that are passionate about transportation, and I think everybody else has similar connections. So I don't think you should view this as, you know, a very stressful responsibility.
No, but I
think
feel
it's,
like if, in my case, in New Kent, there's no formal structure. So if I really want to know what people think about transportation proposals, rather than just reading it on Nextdoor or Facebook, you know, that I actually, you know, go with my, some of my board members to public meetings, whether it's comp plan meetings or town hall meetings or whatever, to try to make myself available so I will hear it firsthand. That's bound to be a positive thing, not a requirement, but if the situation presents, take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, very much so. I concur fully.
Sarah?
I'm sorry. So if we were gonna be like sort of advising on what's coming up next at the policy board or the TAC, would we need to know all of that stuff in advance?
Yes. Yeah.
And then,
So that's
We're
something
kind
I
of
think.
behind, and we need to jump ahead
Yeah.
when
yeah, we're
possible.
sort of like
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
updates about what happens.
Right.
I think everyone's like, cool.
That's part of the issue
Yeah.
that I've heard raised was that because of the bi-monthly nature of
Yeah.
the CTAC, you're not able to always have the ability to weigh in on a particular topic because it may skip a month. But there are major efforts that the TPO undertakes, whether it's a long-range plan or the transportation improvement program, or, you know, the big things that come out of this building, that I think you'll know a year, 18 months in advance, that it's coming. There's gonna be ways to plug in on an interval basis. So I think probably working with staff and understanding what those big things are, well in advance are gonna be the main focus areas. At least I think that's a good place to start. And then if there's other more specific things like a BRT expansion, if Pulse gets extended down West Broad, you're gonna know about that well in advance because of all the NEPA studies and everything else that goes into place. So I think that's not your job, it's it's staff's job to make sure that people in the room are up to date on the things that you should be looking at.
Okay, any other comments along those lines? I
There's a
think
hand
maybe
up.
the first step might be, I'm sorry, John, did you?
There's a hand up.
Oh,
To Sarah.
okay.
Hi,
Oh, okay.
hi, this is Sarah.
Okay, hi, Sarah.
All right. I guess I'd like to thank Champ for bringing that up. I think that's a great idea. And I think, in terms of especially the partners who are from community groups, I think that there could be a great value in working on the long-range plan and how the question of outreach and how people can involve themselves in the plan, for example, and whatever suggestions that our groups can make for the policy board or the TPO. I think that might be a great place.
Good point.
And Madam Chair, if I
Yes.
might add, we are getting ready to start on Plan 2050. So I think there's an opportunity for this body to get involved essentially from the get-go. We've developed the socioeconomic data, but there's still a lot of work to be done over the coming months and years as we work through that plan. So we will be looking for some opportunities to plug this body in and hopefully in more of a proactive instead of a reactive mode.
And Sarah, maybe staff will assist in getting in touch with Mr. Peterson and,
I just sent her his email.
okay, all right, so maybe that's the next step for you.
Lisa, I just
Robert's
want-
had his hand up for a long time.
Oh, somebody.
I'm sorry, I didn't see a hand.
Mr. Robert
Basham. Mr. Basham.
Hi, Chairman Guthrie. I just would like to, please, not a complaint, just point out that myself, and I can't remember if somebody else was at the meeting also, but we did join remotely.
I apologize, thank you. I didn't have it in my notes, but thank you, appreciate your involvement. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention, just piggyback off of Sarah as far as community groups informing the public, especially our networks. What will be very helpful in us informing projects and getting feedback is visuals and slides. So like the slides that Todd just shared would be very helpful for us to have conversations and keep people informed of what's to come. Because a lot of people are asking, hey, I want a bus that goes to Virginia Center Commons or to Piram, but visually, or they don't even just know that that's happening. So definitely when we.
That will be on our Plan RVA website or YouTube or both.
Yes, well, the website will link you right back to YouTube.
Okay. And then from YouTube, could you have the presentation just as a standalone? Like if you have a slide deck already prepared?
Usually
Yeah.
when we have a presentation, I post that separately.
Okay.
Yeah, so any discussion that we have as far as moving forward of how we can collaborate with the board, definitely anything that's done in that meeting, slides, visuals, would help us relay the message to the public. Very good.
Those notes
Sarah.
from that May 18th meeting, those are online, right? That large packet that we kind of got. Because that was probably, I don't know, the first time I've really seen like all the projects laid out, like what their timeline is, what's being funded, what's not. And I think that could be something that you all could get out. Any organizations could give out to folks.
Yeah, if there's, for the Plan RVA website, and you click on meetings and you look at the past meetings, if it's a prepared presentation like Green City, it'll be up there as a slide deck.
Okay.
Also, the recording through YouTube will be available. So, if you need anything else beyond that, I'm sure staff can help you. Okay, let's look ahead for next FY '24 is getting ready to start in a couple of weeks. And so here are the proposed topics for the next year. And Ken's already got a couple of them laid out here. I don't know if they've been, if you've been speaking to the presenters and they've agreed to those dates.
I've had a preliminary conversation with Katie Moody about the presentation in July.
Okay.
I haven't gone beyond that with
And
the
who
others.
is she with?
She's with us. She
Oh,
is
okay.
the staff to the Central Virginia Emergency Management.
Okay,
Am I getting that right?
okay.
Members of CTAC might not realize, but we also staff a regional emergency preparedness group that gets together. And their footprint is actually bigger than the TPO. It's essentially runs from the North Carolina border, I think, all the way up into Northern Virginia. But was gonna get her, and we also are doing some work around resiliency planning. So I thought that those two, if we can kind of marry those topics for our July meeting. The other meetings, September and November, I'm not set in stone or concrete with those. If we have other topics that we want to bring in, if there's something more timely, that's fine. If there are other topics that aren't on this list that we need to be considered, that's fine as well. But these are just sort of some brainstorming topics that we have at this point.
Are any of them particularly useful in the context of the going into the long-range plan or anything that the TPO will be dealing with this year? Anyway, that's something to
Right.
kind of keep in mind as a lens.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions?
I'm gonna just throw one out. It seems like all the trends right now are going the wrong way with crashes and fatalities on our roads. Pedestrian fatalities are up, crashes are up, automobile crashes are up. And I gotta tell you personally, just anecdotally, I see people driving on the roads like crazy people.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if it would be appropriate for this group to talk to our collective law enforcement, both the state police, the city police, county police, to talk about measures that we're using to mitigate some of this. You know, the things like traffic cameras, traffic enforcement cameras come up, and there's always a big fight in the General Assembly. Something is terribly wrong out there, and the costs are people dying. I mean, it's not people, you know, being inconvenienced, they're dying out there. What's being done to turn this trend around? Because we're heading in the wrong direction. So I don't, if we can figure out who it is, but somebody's gotta do something
I've
to
seen
turn
some
this ship.
VDOT presentations
Yeah.
on this that
Yeah.
might be something that the CTV.
I've added that to the
VDOT,
list.
yeah.
I think your point's well taken.
And I'm gonna make one more point on that too, is that, and I've personally talked to VDOT about it, my my personal observations are, there are a handful of really bad actors that keep having crashes and accidents over and over and over again. And it's, you know, the one bad apple spoiling the bushel. I think, and I've been told they don't wanna do anything about it. Well, we don't wanna take somebody's license away. Driving a car and driving like a mad person is not a right, it's a privilege. And if you can't act responsibly and in a social, or not in an antisocial manner, you got no right being out there. Something's gotta be done.
I think we've noticed a huge uptick since COVID, you know, that people are trying to make up for lost time or something. It's people jumping lanes and driving 100 miles an hour, you know, it's noticeable. Sarah?
Yeah, I would say that people are way more distracted, also as someone who bikes only, has transportation and takes the bus. But if we're gonna do a presentation on that, or something like that, like, we saw that those speed bumps went in with the most recent death on the campus. And I will say that I'm definitely an advocate of infrastructure change versus like enforcement that's only happening sometimes. Everyone has to go over those speed bumps, they all have to slow down. So I don't know if there's something that we can maybe investigate with, like advocating for certain places, intersections to change. There's a lot of death around that area.
Good point, yeah.
Yes.
I also exclusively bike and take the bus. Hopefully my bike is dry now. But I was going to say pretty much exactly that, but maybe in addition to or instead of law enforcement, we could also talk to Vision Zero groups such as Richmond's Vision Zero departments. There's Vision Zero organizations throughout the region. and they tend to look at it from a more infrastructure-based perspective of like, how do we make sure that people cannot drive like crazy people? Rather than let's hope that such and such police officer or camera happens to be in the right place to catch the person driving like crazy. How do we make it so that they're not comfortable doing so or are unable to do so because of the infrastructure that's in place? So Vision Zero groups are taking that approach.
Thank
Well,
you.
I don't know that we can really police that issue. I think and I don't know about the General Assembly's position is, but you know, it's much less expensive to put high-tech cameras at locations where they have experienced a lot of speeding and accidents. The technology is that you can take a picture of the vehicle and the license plate, and boom, you've got a suspect. Isn't always the person that belongs to the car that's driving it. But you know, that way, if the laws could be changed, that you can enforce the technologically sound way of doing that, then you don't have to have a policeman out there trying to chase them down. And that creates a whole lot of other issues, the high-speed chases, that type of thing. You hear that all the time, so.
It's legal in school zones, so why isn't it in every school zone?
Yeah.
It's legal in school zones statewide.
Okay, well, thank you for the suggestions. Any other comments or announcements? Anything coming up this summer?
I'd like to thank
Lumpkin?
again Mr. Lumpkins and Mr. Holland for taking out their busy days to meet with us. We all greatly appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank you all for inviting me here, and this discussion came up with the Secretary of Transportation just a few days ago with regard to track crashes in the state, and it's a concern for everyone in every locality I know of. It's a big concern, so it's a very valid point. The idea of education came up, and certainly infrastructure is always there. Another thing that came up was navigating the roundabouts safely. There's another issue. But those ideas came up. But it's a multitude of problems, as you well know. But I appreciate the time y'all extended me to be with you. Thank you much.
Thank you.
All right, have a great
All
session.
right, well, mark your calendar. The next meeting is July the 20th. Okay. No other business. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved. A second? Okay, a second.